Okay, I've just finished pulling off this transmission. As you can see, it's quite rusty on top, so this might be a little bit of a pain to get this pulley off. Hoping I won't have to cut it off, but this thing was sitting outside in one of our neighbors' yard with the seat up like that for many years, so all that water's just been pouring right down into the top of that pulley. It seems that these things aren't these little, I think, like 10mm bolts that go around the casing. I twisted a few of them and they don't seem seized, so that's good, but I guess I have to remove that. But the transmission looks pretty good for never being, but hopefully it holds up to these RPMs now. I've just finished pulling off this transmission. As you can see, it's quite rusty on top, so this might be a little bit of a pain to get this pulley off. Hoping I won't have to cut it off, but this thing was sitting outside in one of our neighbors' yard with the seat up like that for many years, so all that water's just been pouring right down into the top of that pulley. It seems that these things aren't these little, I think, like 10mm bolts that go around the casing. I twisted a few of them and they don't seem seized, so that's good, but I guess I have to remove that. But the transmission looks pretty good for never being, but hopefully it holds up to these RPMs now. Okay, after a little bit of work, this wasn't the worst transmission I've had to get the pulley off of, but it wasn't exactly easy. Right here, as you see, the transmission pulley is completely off, the shaft's not damaged at all, and I cleaned it up, but I did have to use my saw to cut this pulley in half most of the way and put a screwdriver right in that crack, and you hammer it in and split it apart, because I tried soaking in WD-40 and heating up the pulley around it, and that wasn't working, so I had to do it the difficult way. But transmissions, but I guess I get to take it in half and lock it now and seal it back up, and then install that and put in this little 2.5 or 3, no, I think this is 2.5, right on there, and should be pretty good. Right here I have the transmission off, so now I'm just finishing splitting this casing up. I've removed all the nuts and bolts, and the casing should be apart to be prepared to come apart. A little bit sticky sometimes. First time this thing's been opened, so. Not sure what's holding it still. Should be coming apart. There it goes. Well, I just dumped all the dirt right in the casing. Well, there's the inside of a never modified MST 205. Oil's looking pretty nasty, but clean up the gear and it'll be good. I have this thing completely fully welded up, completely around, and I chipped any little slag, like dots off, and little beads off that I could with a screwdriver, and see, it's not too bad of welds for a damaged welder that I use, so I'm pretty sure this will hold nice and well for racing mode, because it won't be a ton of stress on it, because it's just going to be turf savers. Okay, now you can see that it's completely, now it's fuzzy, and there's no wobble in the axle at all, and it holds well. So now I just gotta clean up all the edges here and put it back together and switch some pulleys, and this thing shouldn't be driving before too long. Okay, now I finished getting the transmission all back together, and now I'm about to just put it back onto the mower right here. I've got the pulleys removed, and I got this like 2.5 on here now. I greased the input shaft, so hopefully this thing won't seize up on here or anything, because those are always a pain to get off. Cleaned up, all the gaskets dried up, and I filled it about halfway full of this. It's like chainsaw bar oil. I mean, it's not really meant for this, but it's real thick, and I use it in my other transmission. It always works well, so I think it should do well in this. Okay, so I think I have all the little bolts that were located like right on these edging and underneath this part here. So this whole entire covering should come off to allow me to be able to get to what I need to the stock clutch to start working on it to make it a little bit better. How easily this thing comes out. Here's a look of a completely stripped down frame with none of the excess junk on there. What I'm going to be doing is this whole entire clutch thing, we unbolting that, removing that, spring's going to be gone, and all this, most of this whole part here, I'm going to have a double pulley system coming out right about here in this area, and I'm going to be cutting up this original thing to make parts for it, so showing that in. Okay, I finished removing the clutch, and I've got this thing all cleaned up for tomorrow. I won't be able to finish or start on the clutch tonight because I have to go through my scrap pile and find some metal parts and idlers to start making this thing, but it should be done and ready soon. Now that clutch I'm going to be building should do quite a bit better than this crappy thing, because this thing is just really not meant to do any kind of real belt tension no matter what you do to them, so this is just going to become parts for this thing now, because I'm just going to end up like cutting off the corners and stuff and little edges to make belt tensioners and just assorted parts of the clutch. But if you to see more of this build and other builds just like this, and maybe soon I'll be doing one with a live axle whenever I get a hold of a Peerless 700, but comment, like, and subscribe for more.